Data centers across the world are reaching a physical breaking point. In 2020, a state-of-the-art AI model contained about 175 billion parameters. Parameters are the mathematical variables a model uses to evaluate data and make decisions. Today, advanced models exceed 1.5 trillion parameters, demanding a massive proportional increase in computing power. All that concentrated computation generates an enormous amount of heat. We are colliding with a strict physical constraint known as the thermal wall. For decades, data centers have relied on moving air to keep servers cold. But traditional air cooling designs max out at supporting roughly 10 to 15 kilowatts of power per rack. A kilowatt is simply a standard measure of electrical power consumption, and 15 is the upper limit of what airflow can realistically handle. This chart illustrates the severity of the gap. As AI model sizes scale, required power density per rack skyrockets. Modern AI clusters demand 30 to 50 kilowatts per rack, with advanced setups pushing toward 100 kilowatts, completely shattering the strict physical limits of air cooling. Forcing an air-cooled system to handle these loads creates a negative feedback loop. Moving that volume of air requires hurricane-force fans. Those massive fans consume up to 15% of the server's total power, which immediately generates even more heat. When heat outpaces the airflow, processors do the only thing they can to survive. They thermally throttle. They intentionally slow down their performance, actively bottlenecking your AI training and inference speeds. At the facility level, because a single rack can no longer be adequately cooled, organizations are forced to spread their AI hardware across dozens of separate racks or even entirely different buildings, creating sprawling, highly inefficient infrastructure. Transitioning to liquid cooling is no longer an optional upgrade for high-performance AI. It is a mandatory engineering shift, requiring IT leaders to navigate a complex trade-off between initial capital expenditure and long-term computational capability. Thermal management has become a pivotal strategic capability. Organizations that ignore physical cooling limitations will find their AI market position capped by hardware that cannot run at scale. Air is exceptionally poor at transporting heat. It has remarkably low thermal conductivity and specific heat capacity. This table compares the raw thermodynamic properties of air and water. Look at the top row. Water conducts heat approximately 24 times better than air. Moving down to the density row, water is about 1,000 times denser. In practical terms, a single cubic foot of water can remove the exact same amount of thermal energy that would require a massive 1,000 cubic feet of air. To leverage this physics advantage, the industry relies on three distinct architectural paths. The first is direct-to-chip liquid cooling. This schematic details a direct-to-chip system. The blue cold plate attaches directly to CPUs and GPUs. Liquid coolant cycles through, absorbing thermal energy. Following the red pathway, heated liquid transports into a coolant distribution unit, transferring heat to the main cooling loop. By targeting the heat specifically at its source, this approach supports 30 to 50 kilowatts per rack. That yields an immediate 2 to 3 times density increase over traditional air cooling. It requires introducing liquid distribution manifolds directly into the server racks. However, it uses highly compatible server designs and allows your IT teams to maintain many of their familiar existing data center workflows. Direct-to-chip cooling acts as a precise surgical intervention. It lets you upgrade specific zones for high-density compute without executing a complete disruptive teardown of your existing facility. When your AI models push rack density requirements well beyond 50 kilowatts, targeted cold plates aren't enough. You have to move to complete fluid submersion. The next step up is single-phase immersion. This takes vertically oriented, fanless servers and submerges them completely into tanks of non-conductive dielectric fluid. Dielectric fluid is a highly specialized engineered coolant that safely touches active electronics without causing a short circuit. Because 100% of the hardware makes direct contact with the coolant, thermal hotspots are entirely eliminated. This pushes limits to 80 kilowatts, while permanently isolating the sensitive components from environmental dust and humidity. The facility trade-offs are heavy. You need drastically reinforced floors, specialized overhead hoists for maintenance, and heavily modified server hardware. For organizations chasing the absolute ceiling of current thermal management, there is a final tier: two-phase immersion cooling. Two-phase systems submerge servers in a specialized fluid engineered with an intentionally low boiling point, typically sitting right between 40 and 60 degrees Celsius. As immense heat radiates off the chips, the surrounding fluid actively boils into vapor, absorbing massive thermal energy. That vapor rises to condenser coils, cools back to liquid, and rains back down into the bath, creating a continuous, pump-free loop. Leveraging the physics of phase change unlocks extreme densities of 100 kilowatts or more per rack. And because it eliminates the need for mechanical pumps or fans, it cuts overall cooling energy consumption by 80 to 90%. The trade-off is strict. Two-phase immersion demands the absolute highest initial capital investment and is generally only viable for strictly purpose-built infrastructure. Immersion cooling forces an operational reinvention of the data center, but it provides the only mathematical path to securing maximum compute density for flagship AI workloads operating at scale. Selecting a liquid cooling architecture depends entirely on an organization's specific operational footprint. Consider the retrofitter. This is an IT leader tasked with dropping high-density AI workloads straight into an existing traditional data center. Their optimal path is direct-to-chip cooling. It enables a phased deployment that upgrades individual racks without ripping out the existing raised floor architecture. Next is the enterprise builder. These organizations are actively commissioning new dedicated zones specifically designed for high-density compute. Single-phase immersion offers the best balance here, trading a manageable operational learning curve for a massive leap to 80 kilowatt density. Finally, there is the hyperscaler. These are the pioneers building flagship AI infrastructure at massive, uncompromising scale. For the hyperscaler, two-phase immersion is required. They have to accept massive upfront costs to guarantee zero thermal throttling while pushing 100+ kilowatts of power continuously. Across all three profiles, the primary hesitation from the C-suite is identical: the seemingly massive initial capital expenditure required to overhaul the cooling infrastructure. This chart reveals the ROI inversion. Bottom left, capital expenditure for liquid solutions is higher than air. Bottom right, liquid cooling drastically lowers 5-year operational expenditure through massive energy and water reductions, making total cost of ownership significantly lower. This investment permanently shatters the thermal wall, ensuring physical infrastructure never bottlenecks future AI ambitions.